Hey, friends. Happy New Year. I think I may have already said that in my last video. In this video, so you may have heard a rumor about me that when it comes to decks, I'm a little promiscuous. But like any Knight of Cupsy sort of wanderer, you know, there are decks that I always come home to at the end of the day. And so I thought I would share with you just some decks that, like, no matter where I roam, no matter what comes out and charms me, there are a handful of decks that I always seem to return to and always, they're like old faithfuls. They put up with my deck promiscuity and they're always there for me, and I'm always happy to see them. And these are in no particular order. They're just sort of what I pulled from the shelf. And there actually are not as many as I thought. Although some of the ones that I feel like I know are going to add to this collection have just arrived. And I didn't include anything that I've gotten in like the last year. So things like This Might Hurt, the Light Seers, the prototype I have of the Ocean Dry, a very, very wonderful, just insanely kind and favorite person in my life sent me the Little Prince Terreaux, and that I feel like I won't use for others, but just for me, those are things that I might find, become part of those collections. But I limited it to things that I've had for a while. So these are decks I always come home to, no matter what's new, no matter what lands on my table. When I can, usually one of these will always be in my rotation, or I'll come back to them frequently and feel the same love and affection I did. It's sort of like every time is the first time in a good way. So here goes. So the first one I'm just grabbing at random as I make a mess. Oh, everything is such a mess. Let's not. Oh, all right. Here we go. So this is the Marshmallow Marseille, and it comes in it doesn't come in, but it lives in a pouch that Kelly Bear made for me. Let's zoom in a skosh. So, this is a special deck for me. It was the one that I used in Terreaux on Earth. I love it so much. It is such a cute, charming, great color palette. It has a very Milanese sort of Fina della Torre, Gumpenberg kind of color palette of these pastels, and it makes me very, very happy to see it. And it is, I don't use it as much as I did. I mean, I did use this kind of constantly while I was writing Terreaux on Earth and for that whole real year of that. But I do reach for it quite a bit, and it is one of those decks that I go to, and that shows back up in my life pretty frequently. This is the only Marseille deck. There are two others. There's really only one other. There's the Jean Noblet. I just forgot to grab. Can I reach it? Let's see. Yes. So here's my other favorite. This is another one I come back to a lot. It's actually a very similar size. And historically, this is considered one of the first, if not the first, sort of Marseille decks. It certainly set the template for a lot of others. It's different from the more classic Conver, which is sort of considered like the template for everything that came after and kind of the classic Marseille deck. This is prior to the Conver, and but these two are the two Marseille decks that I reach for and I return to a lot. The one that's on my table right now is the Dodal, which I'd like as much as these two. But these are the two Marseilles that I tend to reach for. I like the Jean Noblet because of its size. It's much closer to a playing card size, and so I can do really large spreads with it. I like the Dodal because it's larger and it's easier to see the detail of it. And these are both, the Dodal and the Noblet are both from Flournoy, Jean-Claude Flournoy or Flournoy, So those two decks, those are the Marseille picks that I always come back to. I don't know how to do this in any elegant way. I really didn't think through this very well. I got the idea and then started doing it. So it really, was at the behest, not the behest, but when I suggested this as something I might work on to a friend, they were very excited about it. So yeah, so those two, love them. Everything else, actually, no, that's not everything else. Let's put these aside. So another one is the Albano Weight. I don't know why or what it is about this deck, but it is a frequent visitor to my table. It's like so ugly beautiful. I don't know. I've had it just about as long as I've been reading. It's one of the one of the Rider-Waite-Smith decks I always go to. It's such a weird deck, but I do kind of love it. I giggle when I see it because it's just such a weird deck. I mean, there's just nothing about it that's not weird. Kind of similar to that is another weird deck. This is the Sheridan Douglas, which is a reprint of a deck from the 70s. And so the original printing is very highly sought after and is quite a collector's item. I just wanted the deck, and the family, I guess, of the artist did reprint it. And so you can get it on the website if you Google Sheridan Douglas Terreaux. I've talked about this deck before too, but it's another one. It's a sort of Rider-Waite-Smith with very distilled images. Very 70s color palette. I do think the original was much more muted than this. And this is glossy cardstock. It was not originally glossy. I think this is a bit more durable than the original would have been. But this is a deck that I wanted from early on in my in my life as a reader, and took a while to. I'm drifting. It took a while to get it there because it really was expensive. It's not to everyone's taste. It's not a deck that I use every day, but I love it. And when I do use it, I feel so connected to it in such a strange way. And so I used it this morning on Instagram, actually, because I knew I was doing this. So super 70s. This is one of my favorite Empress cards ever. This was why I wanted the deck, because in my first tarot book, this card was pictured, that particular one. So it's strange. It's just weird. And that's a common theme. And it has a very similar 70s kind of palette to the Albano. You've got that bright, bold, ain't nobody fucking around here with colors kind of colors going on. And it's Rider-Waite-Smith, but it's simpler. It's a little distilled and almost pippish, which is one reason why I quite like it. So, yeah, I don't know if I have a walkthrough of this. I think I do. I mean, I've essentially done a bit of a walkthrough just now anyway. So I do think the original is a little more muted. The colors are quite bright and bold and all that. So it's, but in the dead of winter, certainly, it's it is welcome. Another that has kind of a strange vibe in its way is the Japaridza by Nino Japaridza. It's a deck I've talked about a lot. This is a deck that I wasn't really looking for, and I've talked about this before. I got it at the Reader Studio on a whim. Actually, what the interesting story is between this and the Sheridan Douglas, which I just showed, is that I brought the Sheridan Douglas with me as my Rider-Waite-Smith deck for the first time I went to the Reader Studio. And there was all these workshops about, let's look at the symbols on the cards. And there's, no symbols on the cards of the Sheridan Douglas. It is that distilled. And so on the next morning after, the first two workshops, I was like, okay, I clearly need something that is a little bit more pictorial, if not Rider-Waite-Smith. And I actually wanted the 8 Coins Tattoo Tarot, and it was sold out at the Tarot Garden. So I'm like, let's do the Japaridza. And I got such good readings with it that day. And so this is another go-to. I don't use it all the time. There's the infamous War card. This is out of print, but evidently will be reprinted by US Games. It's a strange deck, but I love it. It is just evocative. It reads really well for me. The colors are gorgeous. The art is gorgeous. It lives in that space that I love, which is sort of Rider-Waite-Smith, sort of something else. Very open and very elastic to interpretation. And so this is one of my go-tos. This one is almost always on my table. I would use it more, actually, if it were a little smaller. Because, I like big spreads, and it's hard to do on this space a big spread with big cards. This is the first indie deck I ever got. This is the Carol Herzer Illuminated Tarot. It came in this pouch, which she made. It was very expensive, not going to lie. But it stood the test of time for sure, and it's gorgeous. When I got it, I actually only used it for me because it was so expensive. That is not the case anymore. Not a one I reach out for a lot, but I do. It is one, again, that I come home to, and that when I pull it out, I'm just really delighted by, and feels like home, as it were, to get old Michael Bublé on you. You can't really see it, but there's this iridescent paint. The way that she makes these cards is really clever. They're laminated paper, but the cut and the fit and the finish is so great. This is a deck that shuffles so freaking good. It's 20 years old, and it looks brand new, and it's waterproof, which, if you're a klutz like me, is kind of important for decks. So love this one so much. This is a home deck in many ways. Only two more. This is an unusually fast video for me, because there's just not that many, because I'm that much of a deck slut. This, one of my all-time favorites. This will not come as a shock, I don't think, to anyone. This is the World Spirit deck. This is the first edition, and I have the new edition up on the shelf. I love this deck so much. I have talked about it many times. I brought this to the Reader Studio last year just on a whim and used it pretty much all weekend, and it just caught everyone's eye. They're like, what is this? I think this is a deck that was definitely ahead of its time, and you can still get it in an indie deck, in an indie version, and I love it. Yeah, so that's the World Spirit. And then last but not least, this will likely not come as a shock to anybody. It is La Corte dei Tarocchi. Oh, I have such a love affair with this deck. I love the size. I love the paper. I love the shape. I love the art. I love everything about it. I just am in love with this deck. And this is a deck that I often will put away for a few months and then come back to and feel just as much love for it as I did the first time I saw it. Lately, it's been out on the table all the time. It just is a deck that I love. So, yeah, I mean, that's it. Like, that's really, like, as promiscuous as I am. Like, there's not that many that I am faithful to, but these are the decks that I'm super faithful to. I'm just putting them back on the table so that I can zoom out and get a more interesting shot. So, boink. That's it. Those are the decks that I come home to most frequently. These are the ones that over the years I have returned to time and time again, despite whatever new shiny thing shows up in my life. So, what are yours? Be super fun to hear. Feel free to, do a VR to this, or just put yours in the comments below. As I always say, like, life has gotten so crazy, it's hard for me to respond to every comment the way that I used to, but I do read them all, and I try to, heart them if I, when I'm sitting down and watching TV. But if you leave a comment and I didn't comment or respond, please don't take it personally. It's just the craziness of life and trying to balance all the things that need to get balanced. But I really do appreciate it. Happy New Year. Be well, and we'll talk soon.